Good evening and welcome to the third Downtown Task Force meeting. I'm Ron Wayman, the moderator, retired Weyerhaeuser executive and business consultant. The goal of the task force hearings has always been to gather information, review existing data and strategic plans in order to make recommendation to government and private entities in the community as long-term redevelopment goals of the downtown area. It's sponsored by these meetings are sponsored by the Greater Hot Springs Chamber of Commerce and the Net Metro Partnership. The task force members are allowed to ask as many questions as they can or want, and the community is invited to provide input via comment and question cards that you'll find at the back of the room, or go to the city's website at cityhs.net and pull down the Our Community tab. There you'll find a blog with all of the comments that have and questions that have come in prior to this, and you can read through those. You also, under that Our Community tab, be able to access video from any of the other sessions that we've had, the first two, and watch that on YouTube. These hearings are being rebroadcast on City Access Cable Channel 12. First thing I'd like to do is introduce our task force members, two of whom couldn't be with us tonight. Mark Flashner sends his regrets, but due to Passover, he's not able to be with us tonight. And Paul Reiser is not here this evening. Other members are Corey Alderdice, Courtney Crouch, Keely DeSalvo, Les Warren, Ryan Smith, and Randy Foley. For this meeting, first we will have a local banker whose company has recently decided to make a major investment in downtown Hot Springs. She was on our agenda to present last week with the business owners and operators, but due to a clerical error, we got her misscheduled. So we'll correct that now. Elizabeth Ferris.
The clerical error was my old friend Kirby Williams. No, sorry, I thought I was supposed to be here tonight. I work in downtown. I go to church in downtown. I take yoga in downtown. I hike the trails. I do a lot of things in downtown Hot Springs, and I love it. But I think I'm here tonight as president of Regions Bank and the fact that we're building a new facility in the downtown area. Our bank is 107 years old, and we've always been in downtown Hot Springs. We started out at 1621 Central with 3 employees. And then we built a bank on Hill Wheatley Plaza, and we did that in 1914. And then we built a part of the facility we're in now in 1961. That facility was expanded to the 5-story tower and the bridge in 1974. We've had 2 family owners and 2 corporate owners, and they've all elected to stay in downtown Hot Springs. Commercial banking has changed drastically in the last 2 years, and those changes have really impacted our facility needs. We no longer need big back rooms for proof machines or filing cabinets. Automation has really decreased the space we need. For the past few years, Regions has been working on a new main facility plan. We're fortunate to be part of a big holding company, and we have real estate professionals that work for our bank. Several of those real estate staffers have spent time here trying to decide where's the best spot for Regions Main. The local staff knew all along where we should be, and that's right where we are. But we were anxious to see what these independent thinkers thought. And they came back unanimously and said, we're in the ideal spot for Regions Main. Regions, like many banks, sold off our real estate a few years ago, so we sold the 835 Central facility to a REIT. In December of 2013, we bought back just the building that's at Broadway and Main. That's what we're Broadway and Malvern, I'm sorry. And that's what we're tearing down, and we started construction the first of this year. We're going to put many green features in the bank. We're going to enhance technology, and maybe most importantly, we're going to build the bank up out of the floodplain so we don't have to worry about floods again. We hope we're 18 months away from a brand new bank, and I can't wait. I've been asked why we're staying in downtown Hot Springs, and I can tell you there's several reasons. We like our neighborhood. Steve Arison and the Convention Center are great neighbors. Conventioneers come in the bank all the time to do business with us that bank in other parts of the state. Properties like the Transportation Depot, the Embassy Suites, the Selected Building, they're all good neighbors. Our second reason is we like the facilities that are available to our employees. Employees can walk to lunch, they can run errands on their lunch hour. It's a very convenient location. We're near the courthouse, we're near our attorneys, we're near the title companies. Our customers are used to being downtown, they like easy access to our building, and they know where to find us. As I mentioned earlier, the decision to stay where we are was an easy one. Regions, like all the commercial banks in the area, is excited about the downtown redevelopment. Jim Fram held a meeting of all the local bank presidents, and I can tell you every bank there was interested in making sound loans to downtown property owners. More residential living and more shopping will create good opportunities for lenders. When I served on the A&P Commission, I was always shocked how high shopping ranked on the surveys that we passed out. So the success of Hot Springs is closely tied, the success of Hot Springs banking is closely tied to the success of our merchants and our tourism attractions. Now, Kirby asked me to mention what I would like to see happen. My wish is that we can all embrace what we have and capitalize on it. Our architecture, our urban national park setting, and our convention center are all things that make downtown Hot Springs unique. These are the things we need to emphasize. My sense is that we all want great things for downtown Hot Springs, but maybe we're not all pulling in the same direction. We have extremely capable leadership at the fire department, and I understand their concerns, and I'll say it again. We all need to pull together to ensure there's not another devastating fire in our downtown area. Thanks to the committee members and thanks to the chamber, this is a great exercise. Regions Bank has been in Hot Springs for over 100 years, and I hope we're here for another 100 years. It's been a great decision for us, and we appreciate all the things this community's done for our bank. I'm happy to take any questions.
Elizabeth, when your real estate professionals address the downtown, I'm sure they saw the same things we see on the front end, and that is today, the things that we have concerns with. The question is, what's the difference between what we see today and where they see the future for downtown coming up that would that they would bring a recommendation to you that you stay where you are?
Well, let's see. They looked going south, they looked going west, they looked eliminating a major property in downtown, but they felt like, again, the fact that we were in such a vital part of the community, everybody knew where we were, we've been here for 100 years, and they just thought it was critical that we stay in downtown and actually stay right where we are because, again, people know where we are. We're kind of in the center of everything, so...
Okay.
Those are the reasons, if that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ferris. Now on for tonight's agenda. Tonight we have invited a really distinguished group of presenters, most of whom have traveled a great deal to be part of this task force hearing tonight. We appreciate their travel. First, we'll have three gentlemen who've been intimately involved in the redevelopment of some of Arkansas's most dynamic cities. Then we have two ladies who are major resources to preservationists in our state. And finally, an Arkansas writer, community activist, and friend of Hot Springs who has written extensively about our historic downtown. Each presenter has been asked to limit their remarks so we can have plenty of time for the task force to ask questions. But with that, we'll move on to the first presenter, Honorable Robert McCaslin, the Mayor of Bentonville.
Thank you very much. Honored to be here. Jim Fram, wherever you are tonight, thank you for the invite. I appreciate that. I have a lot of interest in Hot Springs. I was born here. I won't tell you when, but it was more than 20 years ago. So I love what you're doing. But let me just speak just a moment about what we're going to talk about here tonight. One, I do not come as an expert. Far from it. And there are no two cities exactly alike. So we'll kind of set that as the ground rules. But I can share with you what worked in Bentonville. I was transferred to Bentonville in 1996 with a major food company to call on that big customer we have up there. And in 2002, I was able to retire, and that same year, I chose to join the campaign for city council and was elected. And having moved around, I believe that was our 10th or 11th move, I noticed a city that was not getting everything that a lot of the other neighboring cities were getting. And I tried to figure out, well, why is that happening? And long story short, that led to me running for mayor in 2006. And I'm not the savior of Northwest Arkansas, let's understand that. But was elected, and in 2007, when I took office, I was able to use some business skills that my employer had been very generous with over 30 years and given me some training on. But the number one thing I did recognize that all of you already know, cities do not go anywhere without tax revenue. No tax revenue, you're going to have a really tight budget. You're going to have a very slim staff. You're probably not going to be embracing very much capital. Well, Bentonville had really no means of financing capital, and they had a great opportunity to thrive along with the other cities in the Washington-Benton County corridor. We proposed a bond issue in 2007 in March that would be financed by one of our pennies. We collect 2 cents in sales tax. We went to the voters in August of 2007 and asked them to approve a bond issue for capital improvement. And as you know, in Arkansas, each facet of that bond issue must have a separate vote. We went out for 5 separate initiatives. We went for streets, parks, police, fire, and municipal airport. All 5 of those initiatives passed on an average of 78%. And this is a sunset bond issue. The tax was is not to be collected forever. At the retirement of the debt, the tax goes away. We asked for, and just because I'm a very conservative fiscal manager for the budget, we wanted to have a very high coverage on our debt issuance. So we went into this with about 140% coverage on debt, which was $110 million. We used $85 million for streets, $15 for parks, about $4.75 each for police and fire, and about $750,000 for our municipal airport. I'm a big proponent, and I suspect you are too, or you wouldn't be embracing this whole concept of the free market. I don't think the city is a developer. I think the city sets the infrastructure. The city sets the environment so that when a Regions Bank or you fill in the blank, whoever the employer is, looks at you and says, I really like the future. I like where they're going. I think that I want to invest in that community. So we began to address infrastructure, and where we began, and I brought a book I want to pass around to the task force of before and after pictures of our downtown square. You know, we are in a rural state, 2.9 million people. We're rural by anyone's standards. There's twice that many people in Houston, and I tell people in Bentonville, they talk about how many people we have. I said, there's more people waiting to turn left in Dallas than there are that live in Bentonville. So let's put this all in perspective. But someone help me pass that around to the task force, would you? But let me tell you where we started. We had a vision in our city, and had since the 90s, that we had a square that was very special. It's the county seat. Benton County is, I believe, the first county in Arkansas from a historical perspective. But we have a beautiful downtown square. It's just a perfect little box sitting in the middle of an idyllic little city. And we have some really great things going for us. We're not the first national park like you were. We don't have Bathhouse Row. But we do have the Walton Five and Dime, and we've been blessed with a lot of other investments. But let me tell you what I believe happened for us is once the bond issue was passed and we began embracing some 19 different capital projects with our street money, renovating downtown was probably the greatest investment we could have made with the taxpayers' dollars. All the streets were old, unengineered streets. The plumbing underneath the streets, the sewer were antiquated. We actually found a water valve that was stamped from the 1800s, and some of the local historians documented that it was actually a project that was conducted by Civil War veterans putting in the water. So that tells you it might have been a little bit out of date. So we engineered all of those streets. including a lot of amenities, paver sidewalks, period street lights. And then we began a landscaping campaign. And one of the best things that we've done, I think, in Bentonville is with our landscaping, we've hired degreed horticulturalists, built a greenhouse, and we take great pride in what our city looks like. But let me tell you what, for your benefit, what I think has to happen. One, there has to be a political will to make this happen. If you don't have the political will, it's probably not going to happen. And you have to have a community will to make this happen. So what we did in the bond issue was to go cast the vision of what downtown would look like. And then with several of you on the task force, I shared with you a coin that we stamped. When that square was completed in October of 2008, I would tell you, paralleling that at the same time over these past 3+ years, occupancy rates have virtually gone to zero. Rents have become significantly more expensive. Property in and around the downtown area has taken on tremendously improved values, and there is a vibrancy in the downtown. And I would tell you, most people still measure your city by what they see when they drive into the downtown. If they see boarded up windows, it casts perceptions that are very hard to remove. If they see a lot of people moving around, colors, cleanness, vibrancy, it sends a lot of perceptions, true or not, but they're very positive. And that will draw investment to your city. And I can tell you that's the one thing that has, I believe, made the difference for us. We have seen a tremendous growth in our sales tax revenues since the completion of not only the downtown area that you can see in the book that will make its way around, but in the streets that come off of the square. And we just refer to that as a click and drag strategy. We've done the square. We like what it looks like. It looks like a movie set in many ways. And we try to pull that out in spokes on out to the other arterials. It's worked for us. It might not work for you. I personally think Hot Springs has a lot better bones to work with than we did. You have a lot better history to work with than we did. And I think that the motto that we use is very appropriate for you. We used rich history, rich future. And I am excited that you're thinking about doing that in my birthplace. I still have a lot of affection for Hot Springs. I went to school in Greater Metro Mount Ida, but I do know a little bit about Hot Springs, and I'm really glad you're doing that. So I could go on for a long, long time, but you probably would get the hook and pull me down. I would just tell you our parks monies have been well spent. We're under construction today on a $16 million, 80,000 square foot community center in the southwest part of our town. It's about 2 miles from central downtown. That will more or less pull a lot of the energy that we feel and enjoy in the downtown area out to where a lot of the single-family homes are being built. But it is a full community center with indoor water, sports activities, and it will be open to the entire area. And it sits on 34 acres, which will have multiple sports activities outside there. So why don't I stop there, and if you want to do questions, I'll try to address those.
That's good. Questions?
Would you tell us about...
Show some of those pictures. Yeah.
Would you give us some insight into your attracting 21C Hotel, and also how big is 21C and what has it done for your community?
Well, Courtney, if I could, let me take the step that happened before that. One, I stand up here and tell you I am so blessed that Alice Walton chose to build a world-class museum 2,700 feet off the square. Did that help us? Let me think about that for a second. Yeah. That museum brought over 650,000 people the first 12 months, and the first 20 months brought 1 million people into town. I would tell you that Alice had a personal relationship with the Brown family out of Louisville, Kentucky, and there was a lot of conversation for a number of years, and I was aware of most of it, trying to convince them that their second location, at that point in conversation, they only had one location, downtown Louisville. And they looked at this area for an extended period of time, and then did decide to build a hotel about a block and a half off of the downtown square nearer the museum. It's still a little over a quarter-mile walk to walk down to the museum from the hotel. The hotel's 104 rooms. It is first, the owners will tell you, they are a museum with rooms. Okay, it is an eclectic place. It has edgy art. It's not for everyone, but it is a hit for a lot of folks. And so that tax revenue has not hurt anything. The city's role in attracting them had to do, we did some very minimal cost sharing on infrastructure in regards to utilities. And that's the only thing we've done to attract that.
Has there been any other hotels that have built in downtown Bentonville as a result of that?
No, there's not. Not in the downtown. And if you've not been there, our downtown is, from a footprint standpoint, we're significantly more confined and condensed than you would find here in Hot Springs. You're spread out. You've got a bigger palette to work on than we do.
Mayor McCaslin, do you have people living downtown in these upper floors of these buildings?
Yes, we do. So it's not a great population, but a week ago, last Friday, we broke ground on a 62-unit upscale apartment complex that is about 3.5 blocks off of the square. And I think the apartment sizes range from 800 to 1,200 square feet. That will be the first large development. There are multiple I'll just say in 2-plex to 4-plex, but there is some above store living there, and there is talk of some downtown, maybe high rise. And I think that's a very that's something that I think most people are very skittish of. You want to be sure you have the density before you move out on that. She's showing some slides. We're just going through those. That's Crystal Bridges. This is a park that we built with part of our park's bond money. It's just a passive park. It's a great place. It's where we do our 4th of July celebration. And the downtown square is knockout gorgeous. Our parks people and horticulturalists plant a little over 2,000 tulips in a very small area there, and that's very representative of what you would see there if the sun were out and it weren't raining right now.
Other questions for the mayor?
Yeah. In regard to the bond issue and the increase in sales tax revenue, has that helped to accelerate the timeline on recouping that, or is that a fixed timeline?
No, bonds are a funny thing. Let me tell you how that works, how it works for us, and that's the way ours was structured. 80% of all of the collection from that penny, we have 2 pennies, one's for O&M, one's for capital. 80% of that goes to the trustee when it's collected. At the time we issued the bonds, that 1 penny was calculated to be raising a little over $4 million. That 1 penny today is raising a little over $9 million. So it's almost doubled. So they're now capturing 80% of twice as much. And when you do the math on that, that will accelerate the payoff of these 30-year bonds. And frankly, we're not going to issue all of them. We've found that we can pay cash for some police and fire unissued money. So rather than embrace the debt and the cost of the bond issue, we'll just probably forego issuing those. So we're probably looking at retiring a 30-year bond, I hope, based on trends, in 20 to less than 20 years. I'm guessing 17.
Thank you.
And all driven by sales tax revenues, and that's the blessing. Rather than the rooftops, it's coming in from the cash registers.
Mayor McCaslin, is your central part of the city a gathering point for the community? Is that where you have entertaining and social gatherings, or is that off in some of the parks?
Well, both. But the downtown has become famous, regionally anyway, for 2 things. One, back in 2008, I believe, we reinstituted what had been in the 50s a tradition in Bentonville, and that's called First Fridays. First Fridays is much like what most of us would have experienced in a county fair. A lot of stuff to do, a lot of things to eat, some exhibits, and it's just a great place to bring family. So the First Fridays, which go April through November, have been a great magnet, a great create destination. And really for our hospitality industry, the restaurants, it is a wonderful thing for them because it begins at noon on Friday and goes till usually about 8 or 9 o'clock. The other thing that was instituted about the same time, we reinstituted a farmer's market. And might I say, this is a very structured, disciplined farmer's market. Everything there has to be inspected in the field where it's growing. You can't run to said grocery store and pull the tags off and lay it out as homegrown tomatoes. So I'm not saying anyone would do that, but let's just say they might. So the farmers market has been quite a hit, and we opened that the 23rd of this month with 77 vendors in a rather confined space, and we have a waiting list for people to get on that, and that also makes it a great destination. Okay. While we're talking about destination, another thing that's helped us are bike trails, and we now have bike trails that are in the process. If you've been in northwest Arkansas, just north of us lies Bella Vista, and it's just a few miles south of the Missouri line. We have a Bentonville Lake there that you could get off and get on your bicycle and ride soon all the way to south of Fayetteville, which is a distance of 37 miles on a bike trail. There's 2 little gaps in there today, one around Johnson and one around Lowell. They're working on those. But the trails have been a great hit. And in our downtown activity center, which we also built along with the splash park that you see there, we rent bicycles so anyone coming in there, coming into town, can ride a bike all over the town or over the trails.
One more. Some of the city directors attended a conference in your neck of the woods this past summer, and I was impressed with one of the presentations on how the cities work together. There always seems to be a great competition, but it's a healthy competition. The bottom line is that you all work together to get the business in the area without regard to it has to come to my city. Is that been a big help to you and your community also?
Well, I think it's been a tremendous help. And this is, we use the 4 big cities, Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, and Bentonville. We do work together. We work together not only for economic development, but we work together for some of the challenging work we have with the group I call the alphabet agencies. I don't know if you've ever heard of the EPA or the FEMA or any of this group that all tend to challenge our budgets with their unfunded mandates. But we work together on those challenges, but we also work together on trying to attract business. The theory is if a 500 employee business opens in Rogers, those people are going to eat, buy goods, live, buy houses somewhere. I believe that whatever happens good in Fayetteville has a residual effect in Bentonville, and vice versa. So yes, we get along very well, and I do it primarily from a selfish reason. I'm old and slow. I don't fight well, okay? So it's much easier to get along, Randy.
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the mayor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Richard Mason. He's a developer from El Dorado that has had a lot to do with the change to that town square.
Well, thank you, and I want to say thanks for the hospitality that Hot Springs shows all of Arkansas. You know, sooner or later, everybody in Arkansas is going to go to Hot Springs. Some of it recently is last Saturday, as you know. But you know, downtowns always have problems. It doesn't matter where you are, from New York City to Bentonville to El Dorado to Hot Springs. And I think as we tackle those problems, we have got a lot in common. And I think as we look at Hot Springs, we can see some of the things that we corrected and some of the things that you already have in place that we'll like to look at. Sam Walton said, I've never had an original idea. Sam, whose great success is based upon really taking an idea maybe from some other company or some other store and looking and doing it better. And I can always learn from someone, and Hot Springs has got some great things going for it. But let me show you a slide where we started. Not a slide, but it's a picture. That's what El Dorado looked like. And here's where we are today. no different than most southern towns. El Dorado started out in 1921 at 3,500 folks. That was January the 1st. January the 10th, a gusher blew in right north of town, and El Dorado was never the same. 18 months later, El Dorado was 40,000 people. At least that's what they estimated. It settled out in the 1950s and 60s, and then we started a decline, which really kind of culminated about mid-1975. About that time, several other people, including my wife and I, became interested in downtown El Dorado, and we started accumulating property. Now, as we accumulated property, we found out real quickly that to get a quality tenant, you had to have a quality piece of property. And I think that's one that we can all learn from, because as we looked at buildings that we bought in right at 1980, we paid $30,000 for 3 buildings right on Main Street across from the courthouse that in the 1950s had been in the heart of our commercial retail district. Now, $30,000 even back in 1980 was almost nothing, but we didn't get a quality building. We had people in El Dorado, old families that owned those buildings for 50 years and never hardly changed the light bulbs. They were in terrible shape. And so our idea was to recruit quality merchants. And as we looked around, it was pretty obvious that if we wanted a quality merchants, you had to have a quality place to put them. And so that became our key. And I'll have to tell this little story. My wife, sitting right over here, was the recruiter. When I would get some buildings done, that she would spot a business out in the suburbs that was just really a good business, one that you really wanted to have. And she would do the old mafia trick. She'd make them an offer they couldn't refuse. We gave a lot of free rent. We put those buildings in, and we found out if your buildings aren't as good as the best buildings in a shopping center on the edge of town or a mall, then you can't expect to have quality business. So I would say to Hot Springs to look real seriously at Central Avenue, where you've got a different mix of shops, and encourage your property owners to bring those up, not just to pass code. You got to go further than that. You've got to go to quality. And that's what we tried to do as we put those businesses in. Now, as we look at the things that make downtowns work, you have to look at what I think is called pedestrian friendly. I don't think Hot Springs downtown is pedestrian friendly. I'll tell you why. You've got crosswalks, but if you want to take your life in your own hands, don't step out in one of those crosswalks. You need to put stop signs in those crosswalks. Stop signs. Now, that sounds really like I'm trying to impede traffic. That's right. I think you should take Central and make it a 2-lane street and divert that traffic that's clogging it up. And if you go out there right now, a little bit after rush hour, it's still a lot of traffic. Move that traffic over to Malvern or another street and narrow Central down to 2 lanes, get rid of the red lights, put in stop signs everywhere you've got a crossing, and discourage traffic. Now, a lot of folks, especially in some of our engineering friends in each city, not really thrilled with discouraging speedy traffic. But if you're wanting to get a pedestrian-friendly downtown, you'll do things that make pedestrians comfortable. Now, that's just one of the many things. And if you really try to think about when you're walking in a downtown, whether it's in Europe or New York or wherever, that's what you're looking for, is a place where you can feel comfortable. You can go to shops that are upscale or good quality merchandise, and you can you'll have the surroundings of plants and flowers and things to that nature. Now, we had a program that really worked for us. We planted over 1,000 street trees. Now, I noticed your street trees out through here, and I'm not too crazy about them, honestly. I just don't think it was a great selection, but it's everything builds upon each other. And more stuff you've got, the better you are. you've got to have a decorated field when you go downtown. You've got to have something that's seasonal. And Christmas lights are a must, of course. But I think as we look at our downtowns, we've got to do things that will draw people to that downtown and make them get out of their car and want to walk around and shop. Now, our merchants, we've got one of the best retail downtowns in the state because around our square, and honestly, we're fortunate to have a courthouse square. It's easier to work with than along Central or Main Street. And so around our courthouse square, we've got trees about every 12 or 15 feet. We've got over 100 planters in the downtown area that are full of pansies right now, and they'll be switched over to geraniums in a few months, and then mums in the fall, and then we go into our Christmas lighting program. And I think if you look at your downtown, you want to have it as a center point of your destination. The Hot Springs destination now is great. You know, the racetrack's good. I think people are going to see that. They like the bathhouses. Of course, I know you'd like to have something really quality in every bathhouse you have, and that'll come as you build around your downtown. Now, if you think of Central as being the core of your downtown, you'll see what I mean. Because if you reduce that traffic down to 10% of what it is right now, then you would have a pedestrian-friendly downtown, and it would build everything else around it. It would draw people. We found out in our downtown that we've created an atmosphere which not only draws other businesses in our downtown, but it draws professionals that would move into your downtown and into your city. So as we look at what we really have and what we've worked with, we built it as a stepping stone to something better. And the something better is brought about by a destination expert that came away with a packet of ideas about that thick, and they just shocked everybody. The goal of El Dorado is to become the festival city of the South. Now you're shaking your head, and I shook my head too when he said, but he's basing that on a place called Ashland, Oregon, that has done a wonderful job of bringing in theater, entertainment, Shakespeare plays, Broadway plays. And the idea, El Dorado is going to raise $75 million to put in and use the Rialto Theater. I think I've got a slide of this. Here's the old Rialto Theater and down some of our downtown ideas that makes things look awful comfortable. That $75 million is going to create an entertainment center with an amphitheater, 3 additional stages and a renovation of the Rialto, which now is actually being used, but it's going to renovate it and enlarge the lobby and get up to code on some of the restrooms requirements to be able to take Broadway plays. And so the destination that El Dorado is looking for in the future, while it's not there yet, the folks have already raised $45 million to put it in, and the renovation on the Rialto is already started. So I think cities need a vision. They need a reason for people to come and stay and walk around and enjoy themselves. So let me just give you an invitation to come visit El Dorado. I think you'll be surprised. I think you'll enjoy it. We had a very nice compliment here last fall. We had a lady, we have something called the guest quarters downtown, and she came and stayed. She was from Shreveport, was going to do her shopping. And she told one of the ladies that was working, said, you know, I just love to come to El Dorado to do my Christmas shopping. And I thought, well, she's from Shreveport. You know, they've got 10 times the shopping El Dorado has, but it's the atmosphere you create. The people awareness of where you are, friendly shopkeepers, people that will go out of their way to help. We don't have any chain stores downtown. In fact, as we developed downtown, we had some stores that we wouldn't renew their leases because they didn't fit into the retail mix. And if you think of retail mix, you want to think of the same customer that can go in this store and this store and this store, and it all fits. We had one store, it's a ladies or a clothing store, it's a national known store, took up a big piece of the block, And when I wouldn't renew their lease, they were shocked. And so were a lot of people. Gosh, don't we think we need that store? I said, nope. There's a high-class jewelry store on one side, and there's a decorating store on the other, and there are clothing stores, and all of those have this customer, and this store had a customer that was totally different. And it's not that that's a bad customer, it's just not the same customer. So as you look at developing your downtown, think of it as a mall. You don't go into a mall and see a store that caters to a certain category and then another one totally different. The mall folks have got that figured out. We need to figure it out. Downtown is nothing more than another shopping area, but it can be made something super special because there's only one downtown. And a good friend of mine helped develop downtown San Antonio, and he said very clearly what Bob said a while ago. If your downtown is perceived to be dead and dying, your whole city is perceived that. So your downtown is more important than most of us realize. And as we built our downtown, we built that downtown to the point where in 2009 we went to Chicago and we beat out 1,000 Main Street cities for the best downtown in the United States. So El Dorado's got some things going for it. I'd invite you to come visit.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Questions, yes.
Mr. Mason, who owns the majority of the buildings in your downtown area?
We have 17 buildings, and that's not a majority, but it's a good mix. We probably control 30 merchants in our downtown, and we have one retail store, which is a guest quarters, which is a lodging facility.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mason, of those 17 store buildings that you own, have you renovated all of them?
Yes, we have, every one of them. They're all top-class retail establishments.
Were a number of them, you said you started with 3, were a number of them vacant and boarded up when you started?
When we started in really the latter part, I think 79, 80, downtown had a 10% occupancy. Some half of blocks where there was less than that. Some blocks were totally empty. El Dorado was just almost desolate, and Les been there many times. I'm sure he can tell you. And it was a job to pick up, but we realized that downtown, and we talk about great bones. All that oil money that came in the 1920s, a lot of it stuck. And those folks that built those buildings in fact, there was a story in the paper that in the first 5 years of the oil boom, more money was pumped into that economy than the appraised value of the entire state. And so it was a huge amount. All of the downtown churches were leveled. Big new brick churches went up. And downtown around the square at, 3,500 people, they had a bunch of just little one-story frame buildings. Those were all taken down. And so El Dorado got some great bones. We've got the courthouse that you wouldn't believe in the center. And we've got a football stadium that's better than most college stadiums. So it's really something to work with. And as we look at our downtown now, it's become the center of everything. On the 4th of July and on Memorial Day, we have the symphony perform on the square. All of the pep rallies for the schools are right on the square. And so the people in Union County really believe and look at El Dorado and look at the downtown as being the place to be. And we're proud of it.
Richard, I know from growing up down there, you really were the one who got it going. Talk to us about and what we're looking at. You've brought a lot of people on since then.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're talking about the Rialto and the dreams that you guys have for that, you've already got a lot of people going on that. Tell us about attracting people to El Dorado. Tell us about getting your game plan going there.
Well, what we tried to do was to say, hey, we're not experts. I'm a geologist. I work in the oil industry. I'm an independent. I have my own company. But I don't know anything about renovating buildings, and I don't know. First thing he came in and looked at, he saw one of our parking lots right in the heart, and he said, get rid of that parking lot for God's sake. And I'd say the same thing to you on Central here. You don't need those parking lots right in the heart. They need to be behind the building. So we brought in some experts that really told us a lot of things. And of all places we went, as we were developing, we went to Disneyland. Disneyland has a town called Celebration, Florida, that they developed. They actually put this town in, and they patterned it after an early American town, but it's kind of what you've got in your own buildings around. And it was amazing as we looked at what they had done and what really works in downtowns. So we tried to pull from a lot of places, and we made a lot of mistakes. When we started out, we tried different things, and so it's kind of a try not to make the same mistake twice, is what we found out. And listen to the experts. If they tell you to do something, don't second guess them. And that's what we tried to do.
Are most of your investors local, or have you been bringing people out of state into El Dorado? What's your mix now?
What we did was, as we bought buildings and looking at the potential for them, we realized like we needed a bookstore, and so we advertised at that one building, and we backed up the investment with adding to it a renovation of the property before we even put on the market. But we advertised this empty space as a bookstore. In other words, we weren't going to lease it to anybody else. And so we made them an offer they couldn't refuse. 6 months, 8 months free rent, things like that. And in the long term, that's nothing. If you get a real quality tenant in, give them 6 months free rent. But look at what you're getting, and just don't take anybody. And we found out another thing. Don't put, I would say accounting firms, lawyers, things like that on the first floor, because you need to keep that as your retail base and have that. And fortunately, El Dorado came away in pretty good shape. We feel like that we've got a good mix of retail tenants.
You talk about the quality tenant. What are your criteria for a quality tenant?
A quality tenant is one that has good quality merchandise. In other words, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think in your downtowns, if you want to look at people that are coming to visit downtown, that's what they want. They're really looking for quality, and so as we look at a tenant, whether it be a shoe store or whether it be a men's store, women's store, you want to look at good quality. And it doesn't mean that lesser quality is wrong. It's just not the place for it. It's a lot of there's plenty of retail around town, but right in the core of your town, you want to have the best. And so we look for quality in the merchandise and the tenant, and we feel like if you can put a good merchant and good material, good goods there, that they're going to prosper, and when they prosper, you prosper.
If you would tell me, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit, tell me some of the obstacles that you faced and when you were revitalizing downtown and how you overcame those.
Well, one of them was that we were certain that landscaping was a big part of it. And so if we tried to plant trees, we had people come out, believe it or not, in the middle of the night and cut down street trees. Now that's a pretty good shocker. Had people pour gasoline on them and kill them. And recently, we had a little bump with the city on doing a renovation of the sidewalks, where they were going to come in and renovate, put brick sidewalks, which were great, replace the trees, but when they replaced them, they only replaced half as many. And so we've been fighting with City Hall. And let me just say something about Little Rock. Those trees that they cut down in Little Rock, somebody in City Hall must have said, Main Street's really starting to go. What can we do to put them back 10 years? I couldn't believe when I saw that picture in the paper. That was ridiculous. There's no excuse for that. And as we go in and do it, we do have property owners that don't cooperate. We've got probably 10 to 15% of our downtown properties owned by a couple of families that they won't do anything. Now, if you look at downtown El Dorado tonight, it's covered in lights. We have lights on all over the tops of our buildings, all around our awnings. We just spent, I think, $12,000, $15,000 on going to LED lights everywhere. But those are lit up all year round. And on Christmas, we changed every light downtown into red and green old-fashioned bulbs with no little white lights, all red and green little white bulbs, or red and green bulbs. And so we've got some business owners that own the buildings that won't cooperate in any manner. And so we just have to ignore those. And you're going to have some, everybody has some, and you just have to live with them. And that's been one of our problems. It's kind of hard to get over that.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we'll be hearing from Brad Lacey. Brad is the president and CEO of the Conway Chamber of Commerce.
Good evening. Glad to be here, and let me first say that, I think from our perspective and what I've noticed really across America is oftentimes it takes some kind of crisis for a community to get real about a development opportunity. For us, that occurred in the late 90s when Axiom decided they were moving their corporate offices to Little Rock. That was the wake-up call that Conway really needed to transition itself into what we are today. So I commend you for what you're doing. I think it's not only important for you, but I think it's important for Arkansas. I mean, the architectural history that's in this city is unmatched anywhere, honestly. And so I think it's important to the whole state, not just to you as a city. But I'll take you through a little bit of what we've done. If I can get my PowerPoint up. Some background on Conway while we're waiting for this to come up that I think's important as you see this. Conway is different than a lot of other cities for a number of reasons. City population is about 63,000. Median age for a citizen of Conway is 25. That was 27 in the 2000 census, and we have continued to get younger. People will always say, well, that's because the colleges are there, and that is part of it, but we retain an incredible number of young people after they graduate. So we have a lot of young singles, we have a lot of young families, and I think that's important for people to know because, as the mayor said, every city's different. And what we've learned, some things may apply to you, some may not. But we did learn some good lessons as we've gone through this. Go ahead with the first one. I want to really start it in the year 2000 because I think that was when we really got started on doing some things differently. That was actually the year that I was hired to run our economic development organization. We had just dropped out of the Main Street program. I'm not sure why. That was really predating me. No organization was in charge of downtown development. So there was nobody that got paid every day to get up and do this job. A once healthy downtown was beginning to look tired, and it was certainly dead after 5 o'clock. I mean, you could shoot a gun down Front Street at 6 o'clock and hit nobody. There was a point in time, my coworker Jamie Gates loves to tell this story, where we were on a street corner in downtown Conway. It was in the summer. It was about 7 o'clock, and it was probably around 2000 or 2001, sort of dreaming about what we could do. And this carload of clearly out-of-town visitors that were at one of the hotels by the interstate had driven and stopped, and they hung their head out and they said, "Hey, nice downtown," and then sped off. Well, clearly they were making fun of it, and we were upset, but then we thought it was funny too because we looked around, and the tumbleweeds were rolling down the street. So there's not a lot you can say about that, but it was a great wake-up call nonetheless. Next slide. One of the biggest things we did in 2001, we recognized that we had no organization that was in charge of downtown. So we started the Conway Downtown Partnership. It is a 501c3. Its sole purpose is to do economic development for the downtown area, and it is funded via private investors. The vast majority of those investors are from outside downtown. The vast majority of that budget is coming from the major corporations in Conway that recognize that downtown Conway is an economic development engine for the city. It is a recruitment and a retention tool for talent. I mean, that's what downtown Conway is for us. When new people move to the community, as they do every year, what is interesting about Conway is what's happening in downtown. Because as does every other interstate town or city, it looks the same from the interstate. Downtown is the important thing for us. And here's one piece of advice that I would give you. If nobody is solely responsible for downtown redevelopment, it doesn't happen. I mean, I have found that to be the case as we have grown as an organization. You know, whatever we wanted to concentrate on, if we didn't have someone who was getting up every morning and that was their job, it really sort of fell through the cracks. So the Downtown Partnership formation was really, really important for us. That organization has an operating budget of about $100,000 a year. Again, primarily coming from outside of downtown. That's where the big money is coming from for that organization. One of the first things that we did was to address the streetscape. Uniformity was important to us, antique street lights, uniform landscaping with bulb outs at major intersections where we were putting greenery in, street trees. We chose crepe myrtles. The first phase of that downtown streetscape was a federal grant that we had gotten, and then we matched some local funds. Much like the mayor was saying, we were also taking the opportunity to replace infrastructure, water and sewer. Obviously, a lot of that is original. I mean, we had some sewer pipes along College Avenue that were wood, literally. I mean, I saw it with my own eyes. So we were doing that, and that was, you know, that was difficult because we had functioning businesses along parts of those areas that were still trying to do business as we were tearing the streets up. You know, note to self, you know, don't do that during Christmas. I mean, that was a bad move that we made on one of the first ones. So we've learned our lesson well there. The newer phases of the streetscape are funded locally through the city and through Conway Corporation, which is, if you know anything about Conway, our utilities are locally owned. So everything but natural gas is owned by the city. So those two entities are putting that investment in. Next slide. So I want to do some before and afters for you. Before, the corner of Oak and Chestnut, late night fire, destroyed 3 historic retail buildings. That was a third of a city block on Oak Street. This was the second fire in 4 months that we had in that block. The first fire had done damage to our locally owned men's store. It didn't destroy it, but they were in the process of rebuilding when this fire hit. I think it was in February. It was really cold that night, I remember. What we learned was that existing zoning laws didn't protect our historic fabric, and there was a well-meaning person who wanted to buy that and then put in a strip mall with pull-in parking, which would have completely destroyed that block. It would have destroyed downtown. And that person thought they were doing a good thing, you know, but it would have been detrimental to what we wanted to do. So, next slide. What we ended up doing was a public-private partnership that was a little bit risky. Our local Economic Development Corporation, which I also work for, loaned the Downtown Partnership the money to purchase the property at 0 interest, just so they could control that corner until the right person came along for it. So in over a year, they began to work with local merchants that were interested in building their own facility. The Downtown Partnership used some of their own money to do cleanup of that site, and then the city even pledged some CDBG money to help pull this project together. Next slide. And the end result was EM Jeans. And if you've been to downtown Conway, you'll know that this really functions as a department store in many ways. They are as successful of a locally owned business as I know. They had grown up. Larry and Liz, the couple that run it, are just interesting people. They had started behind UCA over 25 years ago, lived in the back of their store, moved it out to the interstate. It was in the big shopping center with J.C. Penney, grew it there. And so they actually moved from an interstate location to downtown Conway and owned their own building for the first time. 10,000 square feet. They do better now than they ever did by the interstate. When they built the building, they thought they would take 5,000 square feet and lease the rest. They took it all. Very, very high end. You know, they draw people from all over, really, the state will come to shop there. They were voted as one of the top 10 places in America by Teen Vogue to buy designer denim. So that's really their claim to fame. But dominant corner for us, and that is a bad thing that turned into a good thing for us. I mean, really, they drive more traffic than the stores that were there before. Next slide. At the same time, the Halter building, it's a shot of Toad Suck Days, and you can see the Halter building in the background. That's really our signature building in downtown. Conway doesn't have a lot of wonderful architecture like Hot Springs, but there are some that's pretty good. And this was our best building, white glazed brick. Decades of renovation and updating really kind of screwed it up. Generated very low leases. You know, if you had an office upstairs in the Halter building, you were probably paying $25 or something. It was owned in a trust that had 13 different heirs, and so it was always impossible to buy. I think most of us were afraid we were one match away from a major fire that would take out really that signature piece. We had a developer from Bentonville who was building a big shopping center out by the interstate who fell in love with the building and had the perseverance to work to get it out of that trust. And in the meantime, 4 of the 13 had bought the others out, so that helped. Next slide. Today, mixed use. It is the pride of downtown, really. Right there on the corner. Restaurant includes a private room with rooftop dining on the 3rd floor. Strong retail tenants, and then what we are seeing across the board in Conway with our upper floors is small tech companies are eating that space up. We have a vibrant startup community there, and those are the areas that those companies tend to choose. They would rather be downtown than anywhere else. Next slide. Steel Chevrolet building, again, doesn't look like a place you would want to go. Was the original Chevy dealership, had a pretty interesting arched roof, was home to a pawn shop and a martial arts studio. Really a building I never even paid attention to. I would drive by it and just think, gosh, what can you do with that? I had a local guy that decided to buy it, put a lot of money into it. It's occupied by 2 restaurants now. It's really helped create a nightlife on that part of Main Street. It's open until about 2 a.m., live music venues. Last year, those 2 restaurants generated $2.3 million in sales, and they're doing great business in downtown Conway, one of which is a chain, actually, Old Chicago, which is a chain out of Colorado that has an affinity for downtown locations, and they do a great business. I talked about underutilized. This was our federal building. United States Postal Service was the primary tenant, various unoccupied offices, and the post office had no need for really the processing facility that was in the back of this building. Local folks bought it. Next slide. Did a complete renovation on it. Local newspaper moved in. Again, tech companies took the entire upper floors, Anuvo and Privacy Star. Anuvo we recruited from New York City last year, and they and Privacy Star are halving that upper floor. And they chose and wanted downtown office space. Next slide. You know, we've also done a good job, I think, with civic buildings and spaces. The Conway Police Department, that was their new building, so the city chose to make a major investment in 2009, and then our chamber building in 2000, and then an expansion in 2006. We chose to anchor one end of downtown, and I think those are important investments as well. Next slide. Another before, I call it the blue building. Click that again. we have a planning process called Conway 2025 that involved 1,400 local citizens that helped rank things that we should do over the next 15 years. One of the most mentioned things was getting rid of this blue building. They wanted a prominent feature into downtown. Click it a couple more times. It was a very odd triangular shaped piece of property. It had a bright blue building in the middle. It was right across the street from the chamber. And so we went to work on that and convinced the family to donate that property to the city in exchange for a master plan to do a park and name it after the family. We used our money to do the plans, and I think that's another thing that we've gotten good at, is we use private dollars to do the things that might be controversial for the city to do. So if the city is going to pay $50,000 to a landscape architect to do a master plan, it's going to get a lot more opportunity for criticism than if we do it. And then we can work quietly and acquire the property and then work with the city to fund the park. So Rogers Plaza is what we called it. We stole an idea to do an arch from Carmel, Indiana. It's almost a duplicate of theirs. Hit it a couple more times. Public-private partnership. It gave us an identifiable entrance to downtown again. And it also would expand the events space from the chamber building and give us a public gathering spot. So we opened it right before Christmas. It was home to the very controversial Conway Christmas tree that you may have heard about on television. So the space was designed with a fountain, and the Christmas tree fits over the top of the fountain. But we lost, you know, an ugly blue building and replaced it with great public space. There it is today with the fountain and the street trees and landscaping. And it's amazing what those public spaces do. I mean, with all the controversy that surrounded that tree, any night that you drove down there, there were dozens and dozens and dozens of people down there with their children getting pictures made. And even today, that park is utilized all the time. It was a great investment for us. This is a great before shot of Oak Street. This is in the 1970s. Don't let the car fool you. It's about 1977. Next slide. Same shot today. You know, like I said, we don't have a lot of great signature buildings, but they're very handsome, or not really ornate, but very functional for retail. Oak Street is our primary retail spot. We've seen lease rates probably triple in the last 10 years. We do not have vacancies on Oak Street. If we have a vacancy, you'll have multiple people that want it, because Oak Street has become really the specialty retail hub in Conway. All those merchants have clustered there. Next slide. Future projects for us really are going to be about multifamily. I talked about our young demographic. It was hard for us to convince local developers that there was a market for that. We have probably 10 apartments, loft apartments, that have gone in the last few years. There's a waiting list for them. So we did a survey of young professionals last year to determine what the market was for multifamily. We had hoped to get 100 responses, and we got 500. And of that 500, half of them said that their preference would be to live in downtown Conway if the product was available. And 2 local developers have put projects on the drawing board. This is on the north end of Front Street. Mr. Covington, who owns a lot of property, is going to do that one. The next one, Metro, the flats at Metro Square. This will be about 100 units that will ring an entire city block. And both will be very successful, I'm sure. And I did want to spend just a little bit of time talking about extending downtown. We feel like this is probably one of the most important things that we've done, is that we want to look out beyond the core and put things in place that control development outside of downtown, so that we're actually building this network of urban neighborhoods throughout the city. And we've had some success with that. The first one's the Village at Hendricks. I don't know if you've been able to see that, but this is a new urbanism development that Hendricks College is doing adjacent to their campus. Very controversial, Many locals said it would not work. People wouldn't want to live there. People wouldn't pay that much for the houses. It was on the wrong side of town. I mean, you name it. There was every reason that it wouldn't work. Next slide. This is it today. Probably the hottest residential neighborhood in Conway. It is blowing comps out of the water. We have a 1,200 square foot house that just sold for $203 a square foot. They have set their own comps. It is working because people want that type of environment. They want to live close to their neighbors. You'll see in the background are the commercial buildings, retail restaurants on the bottom floor, student housing on the upper 3 floors. And it's just a great mix of stuff. You'll see some more of the houses there. This is the first of probably 3 phases of single family that you'll see them do. And the interesting thing for us, I think, is you're taking what was probably the poorest census tract in the city of Conway, and within 10 years, you're probably going to flip it to maybe the most affluent. And it was something that people said wouldn't work, but it's working. Next slide. Markham Street. Markham is a great street that connects Hendricks to downtown. The city is going to act really as a developer on this with a lot of the infrastructure that needs to be done, some good public spaces there, and between Hendricks and some private developers, we'll probably start to see a lot of infill with more single-family, multifamily housing, and Markham will be a really good connection point for us. The Old Conway Overlay District, we put this in place along with some pretty stringent design guidelines citywide, and it takes the commercial core of downtown and spreads it out and pushes it toward the interstate. This is a project that will be announced shortly on the corner of Oak and Harkrider. So it's just out of traditional downtown, but the new overlay says that if you build anything new, it has to be built to the street. So it has to be built in an urban fashion. This is a major national retailer who, at first, I believe said they would not build there if they had to build like that and put the parking in the back. But the city stuck to their guns and said, no, if you want that corner, you have to build to the lot line. And they did. So you'll see major national retail doing what people say they won't do, but they will do it if the market's right and the site is right. And so we'll start to extend that feeling of downtown further toward the interstate. We think that's important for us. Conclusions, someone needs to be responsible. Zoning and design guidelines, I think, should be the hammer that you use to make things happen, because it doesn't just happen out of the goodness of people's hearts. It's been our experience. Allow some flexibility. Redoing older buildings is not like building something from scratch. You know, it's a little more difficult. You gain public buy-in. And I think you do that by helping them understand that it is really an economic development tool for your city. You get creative with some funding sources. And then the last, I think, is the most important. Get prepared to leave some people behind. It is impossible to get everyone to agree on something. We left people behind in Conway 10 years ago. And some of them caught up again. And some of them will never catch up. And that's okay, because you have to push, you have to move forward, or you're never going anywhere. If you wait for everybody to agree, it never happens.
Thank you.
Questions?
Questions, yes. Questions for Brad?
For these spaces that you were building for residential areas around the downtown, how did you acquire the land?
The developers acquired the land. One of them, actually, they acquired probably from the REIT that Elizabeth, it's an old Regions building that had an enormous surface lot around it. And they acquired that building and have completely renovated it. And Regions is still a tenant. But then the outlying area is where they'll put those 100 units. So it's just been the private sector picking up the property along the way and assembling it.
Do you have the supporting businesses to accommodate that population around the downtown, like dry cleaners and
absolutely
grocery stores? And
okay. Yeah, Conway was a little bit unique in that we had never lost retail downtown. You know, I mean, we were Walmart's 5th store. and it was downtown, oddly enough. I mean, we can take you on a tour of different Walmart buildings. And they're all still there. It's pretty interesting, actually. But I don't know if our retailers knew how to compete early on because they had to. But I really think it was more about specializing and staying together down there. And they have a really strong working relationship together. It's an incredible mix. I would guarantee you we have a better mix of retail today than we've ever had. And there is a parking problem. I mean, that's really the biggest issue for us is figuring out how to build a parking deck, because on Saturday at 1 o'clock, you have trouble finding a parking space because people are down there shopping and eating. So, you know, a lot of models, downtown models, will tell you bring the people down first and then the retail follows. But for us, it's going to be the opposite.
Thank you.
In terms of recruiting young professionals, how much of it is the nature of the technology companies that are in the community, and how much of it is another factor, or even flipping college students into locals at the end of their degree program?
Well, we've always been fortunate in that, you know, Axiom has been there, and while the corporate office is in Little Rock, the largest concentration of people is in Conway, so there's 2,000 of them. And you know, we've been very deliberate about recruiting more white-collar employers. So HP coming in is another huge opportunity for them. Southwestern Energy, jobs, period. I mean, that's what keep them there. If you can't get a job, you're not going to stay. But you also have to get the coolness factor right, because just because they get a job doesn't mean that they're going to stay. I mean, they could go to Little Rock, or they could go to Dallas, or they could go wherever. We know that many of them are choosing to stay. And I don't know that any of us, and I'm one of them, that went there to UCA and chose to stay. I don't know that anybody thinks when they go that they're going to stay. I mean, nobody at 18 thinks they're going to Conway for the rest of their life. You know, but it just grows on you. You know, your friends don't leave. And that's what you see, is you see these peer groups that they just stay. I mean, almost every one of my close friends stayed. And so there's a magic there that we work very hard to keep in place. But you have to be hip and you have to be cool, or you're not going to win that. You're not going to win that young professionals game, because they do want something that's different. You know, and we've lost some of that because we didn't have that downtown housing available.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much. Next, I'm going to break protocol here just a bit and introduce our next two speakers. They'll come up individually, but it helps to talk about them together. Vanessa McEwen is the Executive Director of the Historic Preservation Alliance of Arkansas. That is a private 501c3 corporation. Then Missy McSwain is the Director of the Preservation Program with the Department of Arkansas Heritage. So we're going to hear first from private and then from public sectors.
Thank you so much. I'm Vanessa McEwen. I'm from the private sector. The Historic Preservation Alliance of Arkansas is a 501c3 nonprofit with a statewide focus. We have a former past board member in Courtney Crouch, and are glad to have the next generation serving on our board now. Our mission is really to build stronger communities, and doing that by reconnecting people to their heritage, to Arkansas heritage, and by empowering people to preserve and to save historic resources. We work really closely with our partners in both the private and public sectors, like the National Trust for Historic Preservation at the national level, the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program at the state level, and then local communities, local historic districts, Main Street communities, and to educate people and to advocate for historic properties around the state. So Hot Springs is certainly one of Arkansas's most significant historic communities, and I remember coming here from an early age with my grandparents to go to the race. They would go to the racetrack, and my grandmother would walk around with me downtown, and it's had a lasting effect on my love of Hot Springs. Certainly, there's been a lot of wonderful things that have happened in Hot Springs. You are all to be commended for the wonderful work in the National Historic Landmarks and Bathhouse Row. We had our membership meeting back in the fall of last year at the Superior Bathhouse, and Rose Cranston opened up the bathhouse to us and was incredibly hospitable and shared with us her vision for that building and the work that she's doing to bring that back. I know with a lot of help. So I attended the last two meetings to really get a sense of what the concerns were of local stakeholders, what the building and fire code changes have been, and to just really get more familiar with the issues that you're facing. I'm so impressed with the amount of civic engagement in Hot Springs. I've sat in the back at the last couple of meetings, and there's a lot of conversation happening even back there, and the passion that people have for downtown Hot Springs. So I thought that I might address some of the common themes, because I've heard the same things going on coming up every meeting, and thought that I would address some of those themes that come up from some best practices in historic preservation and from the perspective of a historic preservation field. First of all, several people, especially at the last meeting, expressed that it's really just not feasible to deal with the historic buildings in your downtown until the vacant historic buildings, especially until there is some economic vitality in downtown. Most of the buildings in downtown Hot Springs are historic, and frankly, if you wait for there to be economic vibrancy come from nowhere without investing in those historic buildings, before investing in those historic buildings, you probably all know you'll be waiting a long, long time. While performing arts centers and convention centers and stadiums can certainly help attract visitors downtown and are great assets, probably with the exception of Crystal Bridges, there are no silver bullets in downtown revitalization. But preservation is certainly an economic development tool. Your historic buildings are your downtown, and investing in your historic buildings is investing in your downtown. It won't happen overnight, but investing in those existing resources, those existing structures, can help build sustainable economic vitality. Seen that now with Conway's presentation and also in El Dorado. But without investment in those assets that make downtown Hot Springs really unique and an authentic place to be, I don't see any way that those goals that you want to achieve of economic vitality are going to be realized. Along those lines, we should definitely always be continuing to encourage property owners to redevelop those historic properties. There are federal and state historic rehabilitation tax credits that I think Missy is going to talk more about. Her office administers those. And there are other financial tools to help close the gap in those rehabilitation projects and to attract equity for financing redevelopment. As I said, Missy's going to delve into the details of those programs a little bit more. For both residential and commercial purposes, one thing that this committee might do is to consider some other local redevelopment tools and incentives. If the owners of these downtown buildings that are vacant and are not willing to take advantage of the incentives to invest on their own, then perhaps partners like the Chamber of Commerce, maybe a Main Street organization, could assist those property owners in finding partners and investors to help redevelop those properties. And if the property owners are unwilling to work in collaboration with development partners, then perhaps the Chamber or others could assist in finding property owners to help them find those buyers who are willing and able to invest in the buildings that make up downtown. I think the idea that one of the, at the first presentation, I think that somebody from the Chamber mentioned about having a database of downtown buildings is really important. As you probably know, the Arkansas Economic Development Commission keeps a database of available sites. But it doesn't include vacant historic buildings, mainly because there's a building floor plate minimum of 10,000 feet. Most downtown historic buildings don't reach that minimum. All over the U.S., older buildings are recognized as redevelopment opportunities, but the prevailing attitude in Arkansas too often seems to be indifference or that they're liabilities, and we see sometimes that they are. There are great resources in this room, obviously, but there are also some national resources that I would be happy to point you to. The National Development Council is a wonderful resource for information on both tools and putting deals together for historic properties. Many people at different presentations mentioned the need to expand hours for businesses in downtown Hot Springs. And nothing adds vitality and 24/7 life to an area like residence. As Brad mentioned, that's come in Conway, kind of on the opposite side of things. I understand that there are a lot of people who live downtown, and probably many people in this room tonight have lived downtown for decades and have been contributing to that downtown base for a long time. But downtown living is something where reaching that critical mass is really important. In downtown Little Rock, where I live, the development that's happened over the last decade, it's taken a while, but it's finally leading to the expansion of commercial activities that are able to meet the needs of those residents. It's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, but ultimately, if you don't have places for people to live, there's no reason for business owners to expand and develop commercial activities beyond the need of visitors. Housing development is critical to downtown revitalization. Many people have mentioned, and including several of the presenters tonight, the need to have someone whose job it is to wake up every morning and think about how to improve downtown Hot Springs. Someone who can coordinate the efforts in downtown to unite city leaders, unite property owners and merchants, and to engage residents and visitors. Someone who can work on organizing, promoting downtown, as well as working on design issues and economic restructuring. It just so happens that these are the elements of the Main Street 4-point approach. Missy will talk a little bit more in depth about the Main Street Arkansas program, but I'll say that the Historic Preservation Alliance of Arkansas was one of the original founding members of that in Arkansas, and it's a great program. The 29 communities that are part of Main Street Arkansas and the Arkansas Downtown Network, including El Dorado, which was a Great American Main Street, receive technical assistance and expertise to revitalize their downtowns through this very successful preservation-based economic development program. I would encourage exploring this program for downtown Hot Springs. Last week, Rick Williams mentioned the idea of a scenic easement at the gateway of downtown to protect the investment that people like him are making and to draw in more investment into the city. He's absolutely correct that this is a good tool. Many of you may be familiar with Argenta and downtown Little Rock. The investment and revitalization that community has seen over the last decade and a half is really wonderful. At the very root of that success story is a local ordinance historic district, a district where there are a clear set of guidelines that protect the character and set up a democratic process for the review and approval of major changes to buildings. What happened in Argenta is that once the ordinance was passed, required everybody to basically play by the same rules, people had the confidence to invest. Hot Springs Downtown has a local ordinance historic district. You guys are ahead of the game there on the west side of Central. And so the groundwork has already been laid for that. I would encourage you to tap into the knowledge of your city staff member who's over the Historic District Commission, Rick Stouter, and also to think about the possibilities to expand that ordinance and to not just enforce the current provisions in that ordinance, but There are options to add minimum maintenance standards in that ordinance, or even demolition by neglect provisions in that ordinance. I've heard downtown Hot Springs referred to, maybe in one of these meetings, maybe Rex wrote it, but as Arkansas's playground. And it's true that downtown really, truly has a magical air about it. But it also has a real feeling of authenticity. And that's rooted in the historic structures in downtown. I've heard many people describe the tragic loss of the Majestic as a wake-up call. It certainly seems to be for you all who are trying to be proactive and moving forward. And across the state, I really think it has been as well. In the days after the Majestic fire, I tried to stay off of Facebook for a couple of days because I was pretty upset about it. But when I did return to Facebook, I saw people just from all over the state telling their stories about staying in the Majestic, telling their stories about what it meant to them and to their families. And I really think that for me, it made me realize, and I think it made a lot of people realize, that you just can't take these places for granted. Once they're gone forever, and we have to be proactive in preserving those and finding a way to keep them in use. So these are critical pieces of the city's landscape, of the city's character, and I look forward to working with you all and making the Historic Preservation Alliance of Arkansas a partner in the work that the city is going to do and that the private citizens are going to do. And I welcome any questions you have.
Questions for Vanessa? Not at this time, I guess. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Then is the public sector with Missy McSwain, Director of Preservation Programs at the Department of Arkansas Heritage.
All right. Hello, everybody. That was quite a preservation talk, Vanessa. Thank you. And we've heard from these other wonderful cities, and it's really fantastic that we can just look around at Arkansas and see the different approaches that people have taken. So I get to tell you the incentives, and I really am from the government, and I really am here to help you. But first, let me tell you who I am. The Arkansas Historic Preservation Program. And we are in the Department of Arkansas Heritage. We are the home of the State Historic Preservation Officer. Every state has one. It was mandated by the National Preservation Act in, I think, 1976, let's say. So anyway, we have programs that come down to us through the National Park Service or through the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, and we implement those programs. We also have a lot of other programs that we do, but I'll just talk about the incentives that we have for you. As Vanessa mentioned, Central Avenue Historic District is ahead of the game. You have your historic district in place. You have one level above that, and that is you are a certified local government. Only the Park Service could make up a title like that. But what that means is, first I'll start with the National Register Historic District. We have the boundaries here, and if you can see it, it's kind of that bluish purple color. Roughly, it's from Park Avenue to Prospect down Central. And there are buildings that are located in that district and within those boundaries that are either contributing or non-contributing, and I'll get to what that means in just a minute. We have all this lingo, so I'm going to try to walk through a little bit of it. And it gets a little complicated sometimes, but it's pretty easy, really. Anyway, you have this district in place. You have the layer on top of this district, which means that it is ordinanced, which means that there are a set of guidelines in place that a commission that is appointed by your mayor reviews any changes, not any, like paint, I don't think they look at paint, any changes that are made to these buildings. So you have these really key and critical elements in place that a lot of other cities are just, they're not there yet. I told you that I would tell you what contributing and non-contributing mean. And this is just a brief outline, but basically I'll tell you that the contributing properties are set up for the incentives, the non-contributings are not, except for one little situation that is another complicated situation, but if you happen to have something like that, I'll let you know. Okay, so besides the historic district, with the contributing and non-contributing properties, you also have individually listed structures. These are structures that are listed in the National Register of Historic Places, and they have come down through the years through either the owner has listed them or our office has looked at them and written the nominations. But you have many of these, and they're all throughout the city, and this is just a general outline, or just a few random ones of how many that you have in Hot Springs. So the tools, as I said, that are already in place are this certified local government, which is, it comes through the National Park Service, and we receive this grant, of which we are mandated to pass through 10% of that. So you all receive grants from us, being a certified local government city. And we have done surveys, we have done nominations, we can do bricks and mortar. There's really a lot of flexibility with these grants. And our office will usually augment the 10% to the cities. Okay, so that's one great incentive that we have. And then, as I said, you have the National Register and the Ordinance District. You have those things in place already. Let me jump really quickly to Bathhouse Row. Bathhouse Row is a National Historic Landmark District. That is the highest designation of a historic building in this country. There are only 18 National Historic Landmarks in the state of Arkansas, and they are prehistoric sites or a site in Helena, but you all have a whole district of them. So that is, I can't tell you how unique that is. And the Park Service does such a wonderful job, and we've seen such a change in the marketing of these and how they have been finally, we're putting them into use after all these years, because I'm telling you, I've been at this job a long time and have been coming here for many years, and we've been trying to work with these bathhouses. So right in your historic district, you have a National Historic Landmark. People come from all over the country to see these. It is a very, very unique asset, which I'm sure you know. But I just want to point that out. Okay, so we have these federal tax credits. And for a long time, they were 25%. And then in 1976, there was some refiguring of them, and everybody else in the country went to 20%, except our great Senator Dale Bumpers made a provision in this act that Central Avenue Historic District still is eligible for 25%. So you have a 25% federal tax credit availability to the contributing buildings. That's a lot. That 5% makes a huge difference. Now we have the Arkansas State Rehabilitation Tax Credit that came on in 2009. That is a 25% state tax credit. And that is for, the federal tax credit is only for income producing property. The state tax credit is available for private residences and income producing property. I'm not going to get into all the application process. I'm happy to, but we've been here a while already, and I don't know, somehow federal government three-part application process. This is not what, if you all want to hear about it, I'm happy to go into it. But anyway, so those are two incentives that we have for you. 25% federal on the amount that's done on the rehabilitation work on a contributing or individually listed building, and 25% state. Okay, there's one other, or there are several other, but I will talk about this one, except I can't really talk about it too much because it's uber complicated. This is the new market tax credit. And unless you have a project that's going to be in the, I would say 10 to 15 million range of expenses, it's really not worth looking at. But this comes to the Department of Treasury, and it was a President Clinton program, and every year it keeps getting renewed. And I know that you have some developers that may be interested in this right now, but it is a 39% credit on your investment through the bank over 7 years. And if you ask me any questions about that, I'll just tell you who to call when you want to. So those are our incentives. And then I think Vanessa made a really good pitch for Main Street. And that is a program that we run through our office, and that is hiring a person who wakes up every single day and thinks about downtown Hot Springs. And how can that, through organization, promotion, design, and economic restructuring, how this can be a better place to be. So I'm going to just stop it there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? I guess not.
Okay. I did bring brochures, and I have one on the state, one on the federal tax credit, and one on Main Street. And thank you for not asking me any questions about new market tax credits.
Number now, though. Next presentation will be from Rex Nelson. He's president of Arkansas Independent Colleges and Universities, and possibly better known for his Southern Fried blog. Rex Nelson.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity to speak tonight. I really appreciate it. You have put together a great program, and I have found it interesting. I can tell you sincerely, you couldn't have picked better cities. Bentonville, El Dorado, Conway, they are models, not just in Arkansas, but around the country for how it should be done. And all of us here in Arkansas should be really proud of what they've done. So take what they have done and run with it. Richard and Vertus Mason, they are Arkansas heroes. They truly are. And what I'm hoping is that the next Masons, whoever they are, wherever they may be in Hot Springs, will step up now in this city. You know, I kind of got into this the last few weeks just because on a cold Friday night in February, I guess that's redundant, all the Friday nights were cold in February, but one cold Friday night in February, I sat down and decided I hadn't updated my blog recently, and I wrote a Friday night blog piece. And it was about Hot Springs. The thing that had led me to write that piece is that I'm an old newspaper man, and my old friend Mark Gregory from the Sentinel Record had emailed me a photo that had run in the newspaper earlier in the week, and it was of them putting up plywood over the windows of the Majestic Hotel. I've written extensively about Hot Springs in the past. I've written about the Majestic in the past, but nothing had ever really taken off like this piece did. I began getting emails that next morning on a Saturday from friends here in Hot Springs, from people around the state. So suddenly I thought, well, some people are seeing that blog post. I can follow stats on that blog. Now, this is just a little personal blog. We don't advertise it. I average about 300 visits to that blog a day. On the day after I posted a piece, which was headlined The Shame of Hot Springs, we had 7,000 people on a Saturday read that piece. That's a good thing, because that tells me that people all over this state care very deeply about Hot Springs. I've been doing that blog for 5 years. That was by far the biggest day traffic-wise in the history of the blog. The previous record, I told the Rotary Club last week when I was here, the previous record actually was when a former football coach at the University of Arkansas crashed a motorcycle 2 years ago on April Fool's Day, interestingly enough, and that April Fool didn't draw the numbers that downtown Hot Springs drew. So it was an incredible day of interest. I did a follow-up blog post because of that. Mark called and said, can we reprint the original in the Sentinel Record, which we did. I write a Wednesday column in the Democrat Gazette, and it was about comparing Bentonville, Mayor, and Hot Springs. What's going on in downtown Bentonville, what's going on in downtown Hot Springs on a Wednesday. The following night at about 6 p.m., I had gone to the Clinton School of Public Service in Little Rock. They have this wonderful lecture series. They're all free. It's one of the great amenities in my mind of living in Central Arkansas to hear a lecture. And I'm one of those sick people. I actually carried 2 different phones. Luckily, they were both on vibrate, and they began to blow up at about 6 o'clock that Thursday night. As again, people said, have you heard, did you know the Majestic was on fire? What timing? But it's not anything I wrote. It was that the time was just right. That 7,000 visitors told me that the time was right. That people, again, not just here in Garland County, but in all 75 counties of Arkansas, cared about what is going on in Hot Springs. I'm not from Hot Springs. I'm from right down the road, though. I'm from Arkadelphia. Hot Springs was the big city. This is where we came. My gosh, you had out of downtown a little bit, but you had a Kmart and a Burger Chef, and those were big deals when you were a kid in Arkadelphia. And then we would come downtown, and you could go to movies at the Malco or the Central, or the auction galleries were going strong. And I loved the auction galleries when I was a kid. As some cat in a blue polyester suit would take a Hot Springs diamond and convince people it was a Tiffany diamond, and those folks from Chicago would pay for it and pay good prices. I enjoyed that theater. That was good stuff. As my mother would whisper in my ear, don't dare raise your hand. Don't even scratch your head. And walking up and down to a kid from Arkadelphia and seeing those exotic breads in the windows at Molly's. I mean, I might as well have been in New York City then. Hot Springs was really different. It was really special. As I told the Rotary Club last week, it has never been my goal to get involved in local politics here. There are plenty of thorny issues I know that have to be worked through here. My goal, as I guess, bringing up the rear here, put a ribbon on what we've learned from Bentonville and Conway and El Dorado, was to kind of shine a spotlight on downtown Hot Springs, because with all due respect to Conway and Bentonville and El Dorado and everywhere else in the state, I can tell you this stretch of Central Avenue out here from about Park Avenue down to Grand Avenue is the most iconic stretch of street in our state. There is no stretch of urban street in Arkansas that is more iconic. It is, to borrow from some surrounding states, our Beale Street in Arkansas. It is our Bourbon Street, or our St. Charles Avenue, maybe. It is our San Antonio Riverwalk. It's something that every Arkansan should be able to take pride in. And yet, when I look from Grand to Park along Central Avenue at the thousands and thousands and thousands of square feet that are empty and deteriorating and have been empty for years, the analogy I draw is what if people were dumping raw sewage into the San Antonio River along that river walk? How do you think Texans would react to that if there were raw sewage being dumped into it? Every Arkansan has a stake in downtown Hot Springs, because downtown Hot Springs is what many people think of first and foremost from other states when they visit our state. Like I said, it is our iconic stretch in this state. It is, without trying to get overly flowery, It is a very part of who we are as Arkansans, frankly. And you, as the business and community and civic leadership of Hot Springs, I think have a sacred trust and a very real obligation, not just to your fellow residents in the city of Hot Springs or in Garland County, but to all Arkansans, to make downtown Hot Springs everything that it can be and should be. The longer I wrote on that cold Friday night in that first blog post, frankly, the more ticked off I became. I would use another term, but somebody might send tomorrow's Sentinel Record to my 88-year-old mama, so I won't. But the longer I wrote, the more I thought of not what is, because there's a lot here that I enjoy that is, but what could be. I come to downtown Hot Springs. I love coming to downtown Hot Springs to eat, to walk, to visit with friends, to shop. But then I look up on those second floors and those third floors and those fourth floors, the Medical Arts Building, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th floors of the buildings that are empty, and I think of potential. I think of what could be. As Missy and Vanessa said, there is true economic potential in historic preservation. Mr. Mason mentioned going to Disney World and looking at celebration. But here's the thing that the Disney Worlds don't have, and the Disneylands don't have, and the Six Flags don't have, and the Universal Studios don't have. They aren't real. And in this day and time, people are looking for that which is real. I had gone to work for a federal agency that does economic and community development in parts of 8 states. I was appointed during the Bush administration to a position with a group called the Delta Regional Authority. I received that appointment right before Hurricane Katrina. I began work right after Hurricane Katrina. And like many people, I doubted that New Orleans, which like Hot Springs is a city I love very much. I honeymooned in New Orleans. I doubted that New Orleans would come back from that blow that was delivered. New Orleans still has its problems, believe me. But the fact is, there are more restaurants in New Orleans open today than were open at the time of Hurricane Katrina in August 2005. New Orleans has suddenly become hot for young talent, those kind of young professionals that Brad Lacey was talking about. Because it's real, it's gritty. There are historic buildings they can live in. There have been loft apartments in the warehouse district and the central business district developed that they can get at reasonable rates. There are good restaurants, bars, entertainment venues within walking distance. Now, Hot Springs is tiny compared to New Orleans, but Hot Springs could make that same kind of rebound. It could become hip, if you will, for residents downtown. At the same time it became hip for residents, it would draw more of an upscale crowd of tourists. You would build on your existing restaurants. You would improve your hotel rooms. You would have more upscale retail. There's always going to be a place for T-shirt shops, I'm sure. But you would draw more upscale retail, and suddenly those people looking for that which is real would come here. I think you might be very pleasantly surprised, and that's why I hope that there are developers and entrepreneurs out there willing to take a chance, a big chance, on downtown Hot Springs. One of the great things Hot Springs has going for it is that it is less than a 5-hour drive away from the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in America. And there are a lot of people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where they consider a mesquite a tree. I consider it a bush, those of us in Arkansas who would love to come to these hills and these natural springs. But they want a little more. They want more of an upscale hotel room than we're offering right now. They want more of a selection of upscale restaurants. They want more upscale shopping than we were offering right now. And if we could somehow build that and serve both new group of residents, including a lot of young professionals in addition to retirees and those upscale visitors, I think we would all be pleasantly surprised at what Hot Springs could become in the years ahead. There have been a lot of good things happen here in Hot Springs, but I would argue that downtown has not been a priority for the last 40 years or more. What I think that we ought to do, not only those of you in Hot Springs, but I've written before as a state, because I do think this is our iconic stretch of street, is recruit investment to downtown Hot Springs the same way we would recruit a steel mill to Arkansas. I think getting that steel mill in Mississippi County, we saw a lot written in recent years about that. We saw a lot of state government effort in that area. I think that's a great thing. So I don't want this to be taken wrong. But the revitalization of downtown Hot Springs is going to be more important to who we are again as Arkansans, to the soul of our state, than any steel mill anywhere could ever be. Because this area is so much of who we are. So you say we've got some landowners who won't sell, won't improve. There are those who will, though. Identify those who will take on partners or who will sell. And then aggressively go market the opportunities that are here to investors around the country to see if maybe they will take a chance on Hot Springs. I'll close with this. Last week, I wasn't here, but I read the news accounts. Someone, I believe, stood at this podium and said, I believe we need to slow down. I would suggest we've been slowed down for more than 40 years in downtown Hot Springs. I would say just the opposite. I would say now is the time to speed up. I think, as I told the Rotary Club last week, there is a window of opportunity right now. But the thing about windows of opportunities is that they close. And if the leadership of this city allows this window of opportunity for downtown investment to close, who knows when it'll open again? It might not open again in my lifetime. Today in Little Rock, there was an announcement. There's really starting to build on itself. There was an announcement that local developers will be putting $18 million in the old Boyle building downtown to establish an Aloft brand hotel. Wouldn't it be great to see announcements like that in Hot Springs? And if you can just get one or two projects started, I think Mr. Mason would tell you they will begin to build on each other if you have one or two successful. So get that first one started. Don't wait. Don't slow down. If anything, speed up before that window of opportunity closes. This place is special. It's special to every Arkansan, and I think now, and I'm begging you as somebody who loves Arkansas, I think now the moment is right, and it is up again to the governmental, the business, and civic leadership of this city to seize the moment. You are part of the heart of our state. But that heart might need a little bypass surgery right now. Well, the time is right for it. And Arkansans, I can tell you, I'm speaking on behalf of almost 300 Arkansans, I believe. The traffic to that blog showed me how much people care. Arkansans care about downtown Hot Springs, and they are depending on you to do the right thing and do it now. Thank you very much for the opportunity to close tonight.
Thank you.
I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions from Mr. Nelson?
I'll pass a collection plate, too, if you want me to. I went to a Baptist university. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Now, as your moderator, we had originally planned on the series of 3 meetings, and there would be a report out from this committee at the end of that. It was scheduled for next Monday, but I get to tell you that these folks have been getting information like drinking from a fire hose. There has been wonderful community input. It hasn't all been here. People have contacted them outside. They said, I don't need to be on television, but let me tell you what I can do for downtown Hot Springs. They are having to process that and work their way through it. So there will not be a report out next Monday. There will be a press release in the next day or two that will revise the schedule to give a proper amount. No, Rex, we're not slowing down. It's just there's a lot farther to go. Okay. So watch for that press release on the next scheduled meeting going from here. I would also, on behalf of the task force members, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Metro Partnership, especially like to thank our presenters. All of the presenters tonight had to drive to get here. It was a long distance, and we appreciate that very much. Earlier, we heard a lot of business owners and people from Hot Springs. They take this seriously. We appreciate all of you being here and taking the process seriously with the intent to help downtown become a better place to live, work, and play. Thank you, and good night.